Hi, folks. We have to start today with a little bit of a disclaimer.
So, our second installment was Junius Wilson, right?
Yep.
And since it was our second installment to this wonderful podcast called Hindsight, if you know better, you do better, we weren't quite ready with our technological advances. We are all about equality, inclusion, and diversity. But when it comes to tech stuff,
We're
we
old.
lag a little bit. We're old. I mean, and I actually work in this space.
I was about to
so
say, you have no excuse.
I still have a learning curve.
Yeah. But we wanted to let y'all know before the episode started that the first half of the episode, it's really hard to hear Akil. And then in the middle, there's a little bit of a shift, which makes it much better.
Because we got things together.
We
righted the ship.
Yeah.
Basically what happened is I bought some equipment. I have this nice, wonderful mic that I'm speaking into that really exemplifies all the richness in my voice. And I wasn't speaking to that. I was speaking to the computer.
Yeah, it was like being picked up on his iPad or something.
So it's being picked up like 4 feet away as opposed to 6 inches away.
Yeah. So
please accept our apology. It does not discount any of the information that we've given.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to keep rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is what it is.
It is.
So this is a journey, right? This is a journey, and we're learning as we go.
Mm-hmm.
And we're only going to get better, and the content's going to get better,
Mm-hmm.
and people are going to get better, and our sound and technological abilities are going to get better.
Yeah. So stick with us, and eventually we'll be able to just hop on and record, and it'll be perfect. Everything is recording.
We are in there. And wow, we made it.
We made it. Okay.
I've been waiting to hear that.
I know. I've been hyping it up, so I wonder if it's going to be okay. All right. Well, hello everybody out there in the world. This is Jennifer Surrett.
I am Akil Sanders.
And together we are Hindsight.
Yes, because when you know better, you do better.
This is a podcast where we look back in history at important events that have been forgotten or misrepresented and talk about them in terms of how they shape the way we think about equity and diversity today. I want to start by telling a quick story. So my husband, who had cancer last year, all his scans and everything are clean, yay, but went to meet his surgeon and told his surgeon about this podcast. And he was like, yeah, it's my neurodivergent white wife and her black friend, both are do DEI and blah, blah, blah. And the surgeon said, well, as a black man, I would just like to say, let's not only do the sad stories.
100%.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
So it got me thinking about our introductory episode, and we definitely were like, we're going to make you cry every single time.
Which I think there's value in pain, right?
Absolutely.
That's kind of where the growth happens. But yeah, we definitely have to tell the good stories, but that's the easy stuff to digest.
Yeah.
It's the good stories. I think the change in people comes from the hard truths that we've been denying people from learning for years. So I agree we should tell the good stories. But I think the growth comes from a lot of the painful stories.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And those are the ones that have been hidden or whitewashed or things like that. But also we do want to celebrate. So we're going to definitely be doing that. And as a matter of fact, I think your first story is a story of celebration, which will be episode 3.
100%.
So
episode 2.
Episode 2?
Three.
3. We're already losing count. We haven't even gotten past 1. What are we doing here? But before we get to the nice story, first, I am going to tell a story about a man named Junius Wilson. And this is a story that's going to cover ableism and racism and institutional abuse. Throughout telling this story, I'm going to be using the term inmates to refer to people who are living in an institution for people with intellectual and psychiatric disabilities, because that's what they were. They were inmates. They were like prisoners. So I use the word inmates throughout because of that. And I'll also be using some outdated language when referring to some places. And then also before we get started, I want to note that Akil and I are recording in Atlanta, which is the traditional lands of the Cherokee and Muskogee Creek nations. And we would encourage anybody to go online and check out where whose land you are on, if you are living in indigenous land that has been colonized, and to learn more about the tribal nations, how to pronounce names, where to donate money, things like that. So support our indigenous historical locations. Anything to add?
No, I think that's a wonderful introduction. I'm all about indigenous people, changing language to honor them, changing traditions, understanding their place in existence today in this country. So,
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I cannot believe we're actually finally recording this episode. I am so excited. I've been teasing Akil about it for feels like years, even though we've only known each other since March.
It feels like years.
But I want to start with a quote so most of what I am going to be talking about comes from a book called Unspeakable: The Story of Junius Wilson by Susan Birch and Hannah Joyner. Sorry, I was looking at the book. And I found this one quote that I really liked because I think it really sums up what this story is about. And so on page 129, they said that Junius, quote, had been incarcerated in an insane asylum merely because he was deaf, black, and poor. And bureaucratic inertia and staff paternalism helped keep him there for 65 years. So that's the trailer of our story. Akil, I want to take you back to the early 1900s, 1908 to be exact, in Castle Hayne, North Carolina, which is right outside of Wilmington. And that's when Junius Wilson was born. They didn't really notice he was deaf for a few years, obviously, because when do children develop language? And it wasn't really a time when particularly poor black families were going to see doctors and getting hearing tests and stuff like that. And they don't really know why he was deaf. It could have been inherited, but he also had a lot of illnesses in life, like measles and whooping cough and scarlet fever, which is particularly associated with deafness. So, because he was deaf and because that was kind of an unknown state of being at that time in that place for that family, the family really didn't know how to communicate with him. And this was really scary, particularly for his mom, because how do you communicate to a small deaf child about Jim Crow, right? Particularly when you think about, Akil, imagine that you're a young kid, you're deaf. How do you get people's attention, and how do people get their attention from you?
Okay.
Yeah, how do you get people's attention, would you think?
When you're deaf?
Yeah.
I don't know. Act out, misbehave.
And touching, vocalizing and touching. And so how do you communicate to a young child, like, don't touch white people because that'll fuck your world up. So that was really scary for them. But it turns out there was a law in North Carolina that said that deaf kids should be sent to residential schools from ages 8 to 21. So Junius Wilson was sent to the North Carolina School for the Colored, Blind, and Deaf in Raleigh, North Carolina, when he was about 7 or 8 years old. And, this was great for the family because they didn't really have to worry about him. And they also didn't have the burden of feeding him, and things like that. So, exactly, one less mouth to feed. And so, the mom missed him, but his mom missed him, but kind of was happy that he could go somewhere where he was safe and looked after. So at this time, the trend in deaf education was something called oralism, which is not using sign language, learning how to read lips. And it is now out of favor. People realize that deaf language, ASL, is cultural and really important for people to learn, because lip reading and oralism just really isn't a feasible long-term solution.
Yeah.
The other thing is that obviously these deaf schools were segregated. So we already said that Junius was in the North Carolina School for Colored, Blind, and Deaf. There was also a white deaf school, and there were differences in approaches there. The kids at the white deaf schools were taught academics.
Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. The kids at the black deaf schools were taught, wanna guess?
Probably farm work.
Yeah.
Agricultural, menial jobs.
Yep.
How to take care of white people.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. It was vocational stuff.
Vocation.
Yeah. So, a very narrow perspective on what academics could be for kids of color in Jim Crow South who were deaf. Now, what's really, really interesting about the Raleigh School in particular is that the kids developed their own kind of sign language, which came to be known Raleigh sign. So I know everybody's probably heard of American Sign Language. If you're not familiar with deaf culture and things like that, different cultures have different languages. So there's British Sign Language, there's whatever. But we also have Black Sign Language, Black American Sign Language, BASL. And they
aren't gang sign, brother. I'm just, I want to clarify as we go.
I feel like gang signs might be universal for a reason.
They might be.
You want to make sure you're associating with the right, wrong people wherever you go internationally.
Absolutely. Life or death.
Exactly. Things like hearing or deaf. And so basically, even if Junius was thrown out into a community of deaf people, he wouldn't be able to communicate with anybody unless they knew Raleigh sign, right? Which is kind of one of the foundations of BASL. He was barely literate because they didn't teach that at the school. So he was really, undereducated. And all of this, just to contextualize the time, there was something called the Red Summer happening while he was in this school, which was in 1919 race riots.
1919, that's when there's several race riots across America.
Exactly.
Mississippi, Tulsa, yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a time when. What came up to my screen? Okay, no. Okay, sorry. My work computer is trying to give me notifications. I'm not actually here. But yes, race riots were rampant in 1919, and they were in North Carolina, and they didn't really tell the students at the deaf school what was going on, but that his family felt it, and they would go out in the community, so there was probably some experiences there. But one thing that the school would do is take the students to the state fair every year. And, obviously all the kids really looked forward to that because it was a fair is fun and they're out in the community when they're usually just in the home. And in 1924, they went to the state fair and Junius didn't, for some reason, come home, go back to the school with everybody else. And he was gone for a total of 2 nights. We don't really know what he was doing. But because he did this, he was expelled because his absences were seen as disobedience by the white administration. So, having that perspective of you did wrong and you're out, regardless of what's going to happen to you when you go where you're going to go, right? And so we had
zero empathy.
What?
Zero empathy.
Zero empathy. Yeah, zero positionality, zero empathy, zero compassion. That's the word I'm looking for. Compassion. Yeah, absolutely. So he was sent back to Castle Hayne, where he couldn't communicate with anybody, including his family. By then, his parents were called Mary and Sydney Wilson. They had another daughter called Carrie. And so he's sent back to the family. And at this, they're still very worried about Junius navigating through the Jim Crow South. But they lived next door to this family, the Smith family. And Arthur Smith was the patriarch, and he had 4 boys who worked with Junius's dad, Sidney. And those families became really, really close. So they helped each other out a lot. And then Sidney, Junius Wilson's father, left. And so Mary, his mom, really started to rely on the Smith family for a lot of help. And they became very, very close. And so in 1925, so this is only 1 year after Junius is returned home, Junius is arrested. And he's arrested because Arthur Smith, the patriarch of that family next door that they were really close with, accused Junius of attempting to rape his wife, Lizzie.
Sounds familiar.
Sounds familiar, except for one little difference, is that Arthur and Lizzie were also African American living in the South.
Yes.
So typically we hear these stories of accusing a black man of attempting to assault a white woman.
Yes.
This was a black man being accused of attempting to assault a black woman. His mom and his family knew that Junius didn't do that. But there might have been a strategic reason why Arthur accused Junius. He knew that it was difficult to take care of Junius with little resources and difficulty communicating. But he also knew that if he had accused Junius of attempting to assault a white woman, he probably would have been lynched. And so this was a way, perhaps, to have the state sort of take care of Junius without having him murdered in the process, which I fucking find fascinating. It's like when you're when you're backed into a corner and you're like, how can I help somebody? How can I help this situation? Sometimes you end up doing things that are just astoundingly wrong. But,
better than the alternative.
Well, that was the thought. I mean, Arthur Smith had no idea what was going to then come to happen to Junius Wilson, right?
Just to be put into a mind state of having to try to figure that out, because you want to help your son.
Yeah.
And the only options that you can come up with are accusing him of rape.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure it has to be the rape of a black woman because the punishment will be less severe.
And you won't have the white mob coming after you to kill you before.
Because they may kill your whole family, not just Junius. I mean, that's just a hard.
Yeah.
It's trauma in itself. Just
100%.
to have to think that way.
Yeah.
And figure that out. That's a lot.
It is. It's a lot, and it's really it's just such a reflection on the desperation that Jim Crow and race-based poverty and the legacies of slavery impacted, just permeated through the lives of the people most impacted by those cultural moves. Anyways, it astounds me that this man, Arthur Smith, was like, I know that Junius is a burden on Mary. What can I do to help without having him killed? And that this was the solution. And honestly, when you think about it, I mean, I can't think of another way to get Junius taken care of in that time.
No, there are no. I mean, that's how desperate you are to have those options.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, because essentially he could feel like, well, maybe I will just give them. I mean, without killing Junius,
right.
And trying to figure out a way, because even the option that he chose is still going to be extremely painful.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how the end of your story is going to be, but I can. So I mean, there's no win here. It's
that's understatement.
Yeah, so when I think about these things, so when and I don't want to take away from the thing, but I'm juxtaposing what I know about Helen Keller to the story, and how we were all taught the story of Helen Keller. Movies know, and that those movies, they teach you to be empathetic to people that are disabled at a very young age. It's assumed why I was in the elementary school. But it's funny that there are stories out there like this one.
Absolutely.
That could have really taught how to be empathetic on a whole other level. To other people.
And that's why I like this story, Akil, is because I think it really is a good representation of the intersection of racism and ableism, right? If Junius had been a white kid who was deaf, all kinds of things would have been different. Nobody would have ever had to accuse him of anything in order to get him taken care of. It's just...
No, absolutely.
And we don't learn about that in school. We learn about white Helen Keller, whose story also is, glazed over in a more palatable way.
Yes.
But yeah, she's easily digestible because she's a white woman who also, I think, eventually became sort of a socialist, which is cool. So no one's seen. So Junius is arrested in 1925. Nobody tells the police that he's deaf. I don't know why. I don't know if nobody wanted to talk to I don't know why. Nobody told the police he was deaf. There was a jailer, a guy who worked in the jail, who was familiar with deafness and knew some sign, but he was white, and so he knew white signs and not rally signs. And so he was like, maybe this guy's deaf. So he tried to communicate with him in sign. Junius obviously didn't understand. And another thing that we see a lot in the deaf community, particularly deaf children and people who are not exposed to deaf culture and good, reliable communication techniques, are what are called deaf howls and shouts and stuff. You're not really able to moderate your voice to match that of people around you. And so, it just sounds... it sounds a little different. And so this guy was like, he's not understanding my signs. He's howling. And so he must be insane. So they all decided that Junius was insane. And so they,
So there's a man who knows sign language, but doesn't know that everybody's not 100% sign language.
Yeah, he doesn't know. I mean,
understand that there's black sign language and white sign language.
He was a white man. Why would he know? White people didn't know about black culture. Yeah. So yeah, he obviously had no idea. And so just said, oh, he's not deaf. He must be insane. So in November, they had a lunacy hearing. That's what it was called back in the day. And a panel of white men who whatever, saw Junius and decided that he was what was at the time called feeble-minded. So he was kind of swimming around in these labels of insane and feeble-minded, which today we would call intellectually disabled. And they looked at those categorizations and his accusation, and they decided that he was a threat to the community. And so the court never even really determined whether or not he was guilty of the accusation. They just went ahead and sent him to the North Carolina Hospital for the Colored Insane, which you can imagine is not a nice place to be. And so, and interesting coincidence, or I don't know if it is a coincidence, but interesting external influence was, as the lunacy hearing was going on, A Birth of a Nation was being reopened in the Wilmington, North Carolina theater.
Oh, thanks Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
One of his favorite movies.
Exactly. so
Piece of cinematography.
yeah. Oh, and I've actually never seen it. Have you ever seen it?
I've seen it. Not the whole thing. I can't sit through the whole thing.
Oh God, no. Yeah. I mean, I've seen clips. Yeah, but
I've seen it. I'm not sat through the whole thing.
yeah. I mean, it's just, do you want to put yourself through that? Okay, so in 1925, he was sent to the North Carolina Hospital for the Colored Insane, and he was put into the criminally insane ward, which is what we call custodial care and not rehabilitative care. So he was just like fed and clothed and whatever. His early years, there wasn't much known, but on his intake form, when they listed who he was and age and all the other stuff, there was a column for occupation, and for his occupation they put criminal.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's something.
Really taking care of this guy.
Exactly.
I mean, even at the basics, when we think that he is insane, he's still considered disabled. We still think that they would have some sort of empathy or compassion for the fact that he's in a state that he's uncontrollable to him.
Yeah, it's really terrible. Yeah. So this, I want to take a little bit of an interlude and talk a little bit about eugenics. So, Akil, what do you know about eugenics?
So I know. I know that it's I know what eugenics is. I'm having a hard time explaining what it is right now.
Because I put you on the spot.
Yeah, you definitely did.
The teacher in me comes out.
So there's another lady who there's a lady who practiced it who Planned Parenthood, correct?
Oh yeah, the Planned Parenthood. Yes. Sergeant. What was her name? No, now I'm blank on that. Yes, the woman who started Planned Parenthood was a eugenicist. Yep.
And basically, it's the pseudoscience of where they think that race is a determinant factor in intelligence. Basically, worse.
Yeah, I mean that is definitely a huge part of it. Eugenics is most often associated with Nazis and the Holocaust, but it was actually an idea that was propagated and promoted by Americans. So eugenics is American born and bred, and really focused on creating the optimal human person, like through breeding. So, who they used to have like best baby contests and stuff like that. But then also through other means like, the Holocaust, famously murder is one way. Sterilization was another way. And so a lot of disabled people were sterilized. The first laws of involuntary sterilization started in 1907 in Indiana, mainly for criminals. And then it slowly started to expand over the 1910s and the 1920s. And it was in the 20s when the shift in sterilization started to focus on people with disabilities. There's a really famous case called Buck v. Bell, which I'll probably do an entire episode on. But by 1932, 30 states had eugenic laws about sterilizing disabled people. And there are still states with this on the books that say, you know, you can involuntarily sterilize somebody who's intellectually disabled. I know, it's awful. And there's still like legacies of this in other interesting ways. I remember about a decade ago, a judge in California got in trouble for offering black men the choice between sterilization and prison. Yeah, I mean, I need to probably go back and double check those facts, but there's definitely been that kind of stuff. So, you know, so sterilization, obviously for women, is a hysterectomy. You can do a vasectomy for men. That was founded in the 1890s. And in North Carolina, a law was passed called an Act to Provide for the Sterilization of the Mentally Defective and Feeble-Minded Inmates of Charitable and Penal Institutions of North Carolina. Huge long name, but basically said that the head of these institutions could just decide who should be sterilized. And so Junius was sterilized along with 49 other people, but Junius was not given a vasectomy. Junius and 12 other people were castrated. Yeah. Why? I don't know. But they, they could have given a vasectomy and they totally castrated him. Which I assume was, I say I don't know, but my assumption would be this idea that castration leads to more calmer people. And if you have this label of being criminally insane and a threat and all this other stuff, then, you know, maybe.
Or it could just be sadistic.
Excuse us for learning how to create a podcast.
Yeah, don't judge us.
The first half of the audio is going to be shit.
Exactly. All things aren't equitable on the first time.
Exactly. Luckily, I was doing most of the talking.
Yes. I could listen to you perfect.
Excellent.
Heard everything you said.
Great. Okay. So we were talking about eugenics.
Yep.
And how Junius was castrated instead of given a vasectomy, which neither of should have happened. But so now he's in this institution. People assume he's intellectually disabled or psychiatrically disabled when in fact he's of sound mind. He's deaf. He can't communicate with anybody because there's nobody else in the institution who is deaf. The other thing that is important to know about institutions now and at that time, more so at that time, is that there was like no privacy at all in these institutions. Yeah. And so, the superintendent said that Junius was criminally insane, mentally defective, a sexual pervert, deaf and dumb, and promiscuous. And probably some of this was due to the fact that, you know, if, like all people, Junius wanted to masturbate before he was castrated, he wouldn't be able to hear people coming. And so that led to the assumption, again, because nobody knew he was deaf, that he was a sexual pervert. So all of these labels are being, piled upon Junius with no actual evidence. You know, like in school, there was no evidence of intellectual disability. But once they castrated him, which again, you know, leads to more, the thought is that it leads to sort of calmer, more controllable people. They realized they didn't need to watch him as much, and then they could use his labor a little bit more. What's going on with your tongue?
The last drop of that coffee had a bunch of coffee.
Oh, that happened to me like 20 minutes ago.
It is horrible. Don't worry worries. I think I got it all.
All right. Submissive. I have the word right here in my notes. Castration makes people more submissive. And so, well, yeah, because it's, you remember reading about like eunuchs and stuff? Yeah. They were castrated in order to prevent if they were singers, to prevent their voices from rising, but also to make them servants, that they just were submissive, because you don't have, all the testosterone and all of these other things. Yeah.
You know who else famously was castrated as a child?
Who?
George Washington Carver.
No shit.
Yes. And if you ever hear, there's like 1 or 2 recordings of his voice.
Yeah.
Very high pitched. And he was castrated as a child.
Why?
I don't know. Maybe I can tell that story.
Yeah. TBD. So the other thing at the time, these institutions, a lot of times they were huge. And they would have, a lot of the institutions would have a farm, and they would, sell vegetables and whatever else to the locals to make some money. So he started living
capitalism.
Exactly. There's a little bit of neoliberalism, a little bit of capitalism in here. And in this particular institution, they have an institutional farm, which, it was about a half a mile from the main campus. So Junius started living there. It was like a big dormitory with like 100 people. And so he started working on this farm. Now, you may be wondering, what's happening with his family? Where are they? So Arthur Smith, who had been helping his mom financially, the neighbor, died. And so they were really struggling financially. But in the 1940s, the family did try to get him out. His sister Carrie and his father Sidney, who at the time was living in Waycross, Georgia, went to the institution and saw him and gave him his mom's address, but he wasn't released, and nobody knows why. There's no records of what happened once they left. So, so meanwhile, Junius is there. He sees his sister and dad after many, many years, and then just he doesn't know what's going on. Nobody can communicate with him. He's not literate. He can't write it down. Also, interestingly, in the 1930s, another deaf black man was institutionalized and became an inmate at the same place, but they didn't really interact at all. They didn't really know each other. And the authors of the book, suppose that might be on purpose, that they kept them apart on purpose, but there's really no certain evidence of that. Nothing was like
written down.
Yeah. In the 1940s, the process of deinstitutionalization kind of was sprouted. So deinstitutionalization, what do you know about deinstitutionalization?
I don't.
Great.
But I can guess that they started to take these people who were institutionalized and maybe start to mix them back into society in some way.
Exactly.
And that's kind of led to insane asylums and these wards being now defunct, obviously, right?
Yeah. 100%. So in the 1940s is when you started to see some exposés come out about how horrible, because it was the Depression. People were sending their family members more often to these institutions, but there wasn't like increased staff, so they were super overcrowded. They became, they were just terrible places. And so deinstitutionalization started in the 1940s, and that's just to keep in the back of your mind, because eventually people will wonder if Junius can be deinstitutionalized, and that becomes part of the conversation. So Junius worked on the farm through the 60s. He was the water boy, so he was supposed to keep the water cool for people. But he also sold worms on the side of the road to farmers, just on his own.
Hustler.
What's that?
He was a hustler.
Exactly. He was a bit of a hustler. Because not only did he sell worms, but he would buy candy and then resell it for more money to people.
Now that's one of the most OG hustles.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
That is an OG hustle right there. I've been a part of that hustle before in my life.
Yeah. It's a good way to make a buck. And Junius saved up enough money to buy a bike. And he
wasn't as crazy as they tried to.
Quite smart, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Not being able to communicate, but being able to figure out how to do things on his own.
Yep.
Without having anyone be able to communicate with him.
Yep. But at the time, that's not at all interpreted as any kind of intelligence. But, the other thing is that staff at these institutions would often live on campus. And so there's all these kids running around. And Junius would, hang out with these kids. And, they'd ride bikes around together and sell worms together and stuff like that. So in the 60s, Junius was moved back to main campus and put again in a locked ward. So he had more freedom when he was on the farm, but he was getting older. And he started working in the dining ward. They misjudged his age. They thought he was born in 1898 when actually he was born in 1907, I think it was. 1908. And so they put him in the geriatric ward. It's like every step of the way, people are just like...
They just get it wrong.
Everything about him. I mean, it's just astounding. And so there was there was less freedom in this geriatric locked ward. And so there was Junius. In the 1970s, again, as a part of the reform movement, the deinstitutionalization reform movement, the institution got certified for something called industrial therapy, which is a way of getting institutionalized inmates to work and make money. So the institution opened a car wash, and Junius started working on that and seemed to really enjoy it and like the cars. But, they weren't paying Junius, they were paying the institution.
Yes.
Of course. Because of deinstitutionalization in the 70s, people started to come and evaluate various inmates to see if they're eligible for community integration. And people came and evaluated him and found that he wasn't mentally ill. Shocking. And said that he could be released on a trial basis with his family, but nobody could find his family. By this time, it's the 1970s, his dad had died, and nobody knew where his mom or sister was living. So he's in this place. People have finally, after almost 50 years, over 50 years, found him, he actually shouldn't be here. But we have done no work to keep up with his people, so he just has to stay. So they moved him to what's called a community house, where him and other inmates went to learn living skills, but still nobody could communicate with him. And the authors of the books said, his survival technique was, quote, follow, mimic, submit, assist, unquote. Which is a survival technique when you're in that kind of situation. But he would also get frustrated and angry with communication difficulties, as one is wont to do, and lash out. And so when that happened, the staff were like, oh no, he can't be released. He's still dangerous. So it was just this cycle of no, I think he can be released. And then something frustrating would happen and Junius would react naturally out of frustration, and people would be like, oh no, he needs to stay. And so this kind of started this whole cycle. I'm not going to go into all the details about this, but various people came in to evaluate him and try to communicate with him in the 80s and 90s, including people who knew about Raleigh sign and ASL and things like that. Eventually the charges against him were dropped in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Remember those?
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How good it's going to do in his 90s.
I know, right? On page 110, the author said, quote, when they realized that a mistake had been made, it was too late. It was almost too cruel to put him out.
That's insane.
Yeah, so continued institutionalization was seen as the benevolent thing to do. They had him sign, and so as a result of that, they had him sign documents that he could not read, saying he was voluntarily committing himself to the institution.
So they just fixing one wrong with another wrong.
Yeah, they like gaslighted him into staying. Again, people came in, tried to communicate with him with sign. He started trying to learn some sign.
So how old was he by this point?
So this is the 80s. So he's in his late 60s, early 70s, because he was born in
If he was really born in
1908.
1908.
And this is the 80s. So yeah.
So that's at least 70.
He's in his 70s, yeah. And
I mean, that the amount of resilience to live a life like that,
yeah,
into your 70s, that's amazing.
It is amazing, but I don't know if resilience is the right word, because Junius was just like forced to exist. Well, he had no options, and so he did the best he could. I agree with you on that, like selling the worms and getting his bike and finding. He had various friends that were staff members and stuff like that. But what I see it as it's just rooted in dehumanization. Like, this guy doesn't need to be anywhere where there's community and humanity.
But that's what I'm saying, though. When you dehumanize people, they become less human.
Yeah.
And then they start to their actions become less human, which in America in the mid 1900s could get you killed really quickly. And
yes.
For him to have lasted into the modern era, where obviously by the 80s we frowned upon, even though there were lynchings, we still frowned upon lynching and things like that. Like, to have lasted that long,
yeah, that's true.
Not being able to communicate with people not wanting to even teach you how to communicate, and just undervaluing you as a human being, period. Just to be able to last and get to the point where they can still, kind of fuck you over.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
And he clearly had some really good insight into human nature, because again, the author said that his survival technique was follow, mimic, submit, assist, which is all things that he figured, he learned through observation and trial and error, and that's how he survived, just by becoming an easy person. It's just, yeah. And there's this whole, concept of the institutionalized person, that if somebody is institutionalized for so long, they can't really leave, which isn't accurate, but it's kind of how the institutions started to see Junius when they were evaluating him. They're doing these evaluations and they're like, oh, he's not mentally ill, he's not feeble-minded, but how can he go back to the community, right? Yeah. To justify him kind of staying there. So I have another quote. It's a little bit long, but I think it's a really good summation of exactly this point. On page 118, they said, quote, "In many ways, the evaluations of Junius Wilson in the early 1980s embodied two conflicting cultural perspectives infused with medical, social, and linguistic meaning." The hospital had been renamed Cherry. So the hospital sat Cherry, like the fruit, Cherry Hospital. So they went on saying, Cherry staff, who felt a keen personal and emotional attachment to the man, saw Wilson through their hearing, quote unquote, eyes. When advocates considered deinstitutionalizing Wilson, they looked for settings in which a hearing man of Wilson's age and intelligence might prosper. Finding his deafness too complicating to enable that option to be effective, they sought to make his current environment as home-like as possible. But not knowing sign language or deaf culture, the hospital made this quote-unquote home-like environment a hearing home, which I like to add also had locks on the doors. So, the thing about, deaf culture, when I talk about deaf culture, capital D, deaf, when you see that refers to deaf culture. Lowercase d, deaf, refers to a hearing impairment. But so deaf culture is, it is, like I said earlier, super vibrant and supportive. but also creates the physical environment in which you can thrive. And it's different from a hearing environment. And so they just was like, it's too hard to find a community placement. We'll just live here, but we're going to make it like a home. But they made it like a home that they would be able to flourish in, not Junius. He's still living there. He's still in the geriatric ward. And he had a stroke in 1986. And the stroke left him with some weakness, which meant he couldn't do the things that he actually enjoyed doing, like riding his bike or even washing the cars. And the physical therapist said he shouldn't have therapy because he was too old. Again, they thought he was a decade older than he was, but still.
Yeah, I mean, do we not give old people therapy?
Yeah, I know. Like, I know of an 80-something-year-old woman who's about to get a hip replacement. Like,
I mean, that's what water aerobics is.
That's exactly. Put them in a pool, folks.
Put them in a pool.
So in the late 80s, he got a new social worker, a woman named Linda Taylor, who started to recommend, who kind of like saw his difficulties and was like, this isn't right, and recommended he get a guardian outside of the institution. And so contacted the assistant director of the county social services, a man named John Wasson, about it. And so Wasson became his guardian and started to talk to reporters about his story. Because he was like, this is the only way to get him out of here. Some of the news articles actually reached some of Junius's family members, who let him know that his sister was actually still alive and in New York. And so from then on until his death, he actually had some communication with some cousins and with his sister, who wanted him out of the institution, but again, couldn't make it happen because placement was difficult and the family was not comfortable taking him in because they couldn't communicate with him. So, various things were happening. A deaf janitor was hired at Cherry, and he would hang out with Junius sometimes, and they would sign and Raleigh sign a little bit later. And then after that, this other local man knew Raleigh sign, so he befriended Junius. And so in 1993, again, Wasson, that guardian, is continuing to advocate for him, getting his news stories out. The institution is still trying to make it home-like, quote unquote, for Junius. And in 1993, Junius started saying he wanted to go home and leave the institution. And people didn't really know what to take of that, because what did he even mean by home, right?
Yeah.
So the compromise was there were like cottages, all over the institution campus because staff used to live on grounds. And so they said, you know what, we'll move him into one of these little cottages and he'll have all the freedom he wants. And so in 1994, February 4th, he moved into his cottage where he was supposed to be able to live independently. However, he still wasn't able to make all his own decisions. He still had staff with him 24/7. The staff still were very paternalistic. They wouldn't let him buy tobacco or alcohol or sweets. And he didn't get his own key for over a year to his own house. Yeah. Yeah. I know. But he would have visitors and he would show off his place and possessions. Also, I'm not going to go into the details of this, but around the same time, his cousin did a lawsuit to the county, and he lived in California. And it's, some people were suggesting that he was trying to capitalize on Junius Wilson's case. I don't think that that's exactly right. But the case was closed in 1997, and his cousin Andre got some kind of settlement and a guarantee that Junius would get good care and stay in the cottage. And his health started to decline in 2000, and he was moved back to the hospital, to the nursing ward. So he went back to.
So he's now 90.
Yeah.
90.
2000. He's 90 something. I'm so bad at calculating age.
91, 92.
Thank you.
He was born in 1908.
Simple math.
I'm here with you.
Thank you. And on March 7th, 2001, Junius died of respiratory failure, and there were over 100 people at his funeral. And in 2003, North Carolina removed their sterilization law.
Oh,
yeah.
Finally.
Yeah.
Wow. You finally caught up.
I know.
You know, with this, I always think, there's this big argument about reparations in America. And I think that reparations are owed more so for the atrocities of Jim Crow than for slavery. And I think if we were to focus on stories like this, then you would have a better case, or at least a more palatable case for the powers that be to understand why reparations are owed.
Yeah, and also because it's more recent. You know,
it's more recent. Like people can reach back and touch this because their parents lived during this time frame.
Exactly.
You know, a lot of people think that Jim Crow was so long ago, and it really wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, we had, separate facilities well into the 60s, and even when integration did happen, the backlash was fucking...
There's still places that have separate facilities.
Yeah.
Like if you go to Mississippi, some towns in Mississippi, it's still alive and well.
Oh, absolutely. Like those sundowner towns?
Absolutely. Funny thing is they thought they were doing something really nice.
Yeah.
They really were patting themselves on the back, I'm sure.
100%.
And it's just like, it's too little too late.
Yeah.
And he's just a story now that is hidden amongst all the other stories. Because think about this. Being deaf, there's probably lots of Juniuses out there during that time frame that we don't know anything about. I mean, he's just the one to make it to 2000.
Exactly.
There's lots of people in history of this country who've had disabilities and been misunderstood. Was that him?
Yeah.
Oh wow. He's good looking.
I know. Oh, he loved his hats. He loved baseball caps. So he just collected them. You can kind of see them there.
Look at his high-waisted belt. Like it. Wearing it just like that's just, just to be able to have a smile on your face.
I know.
At that age, after enduring all of Jim Crow. All of Jim Crow.
All of Jim Crow.
Everything Jim Crow had to give, he received.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But you're right. I think that had not this social worker, and I'm not trying to elevate the level of importance of the other people in his life, but had this social worker not been like, he needs a guardian, and had that guardian not been like, yeah, let's do some news stories about that, we would not be talking about this at all, right?
No, not at all. You're absolutely right.
And so, who else, like you said, who else are we forgetting about in history?
And we're not documented. Or succumb to violence.
Exactly.
Because they were misunderstood.
Exactly. Yeah, and in the disability community, it happened, it still happens all the time, like the abuse and neglect. And then again, you combine it with gender, being a male, and race, being a black male, and time, era, being Jim Crow, and it's, what hope did he have, Yeah.
But somehow he was able to last.
Exactly. Here's his bike.
Wow. It's a great story, though.
Isn't it? So now, okay, yes.
I see these types of stories, though they're hidden and though they are sad, they are good to learn about because it really is. That's resilience at its finest.
Yeah.
To be able to last and live till 96 through all of those trials and tribulations that you didn't cause at all.
Yeah.
That were just naturally handed to you, and somehow you were able to navigate
this cruel world without all the senses that everyone else is naturally born with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's sad, but it's also triumphant to be able to see him smiling in the end. You know.
Yeah, I mean, you appreciate what you're given to appreciate, you know, and he had no choice in the matter. And honestly, you know, again, like, he didn't really know any other kind of life. And so when you're restricted your whole life and then given a little bit of freedom, that freedom seems huge and amazing. To whereas if it was us, we'd be like, fuck that. I want my own key to my house. I want to be able to buy whatever the fuck I want. You know, like, so, you know, so compare it. So nobody exposed him to what a human life lived with dignity could be. And, you know, and so he took joys in where he found it, which is human nature, you know. But I think that this story really reflects how the systemic racism and ableism just compounds itself. And these people, these usually white men who are in charge that perpetuate the system, knowingly or unknowingly, make decisions in a way that lead to these horrific human rights issues, like, you know, castration and incarceration and control. And, you know, it's in I mean, yeah, it's just, I like the story because I think that it's a good way of giving an example of the systemic, how systems can compound in that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I had never heard that story, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't think many people have. I mean, this book is amazing, and I only learned about it because I was doing like dissertation research and came across it. And so, again, it's Unspeakable: The Story of Junius Wilson. Highly recommend it.
I'm gonna have to check that out. So, how do we learn from these types of experiences? Like, what are the lessons that we should take from, you know, a life that spanned 9 decades throughout the most crucial eras of this country that literally made this country into exactly what it is today. You know, going through the Red Summer of 1919, through the Depression, through the New Deal, through the ending of Jim Crow legally, through the technological age, and just understanding like that life and what lessons do we take from his life, and how do we
do better?
How do we do better? That's what hindsight's about, right?
That's a great, we know better now about Junius Wilson, so how do we use that to do better?
Absolutely.
You know, to me, it reminds me of, or it makes me reemphasize to myself that legacies of racism and ableism and sexism and all of these isms, othering and all that other stuff, are baked into the systems we live in. And so we need to do a better job at having some perspective when looking at the way our society does and does not support people. So, for example, the hearing staff at the institution was like, we're going to set up this great place for Junius, and it's going to be like home, and it's going to be so comfortable. But if you were a deaf person setting up a place, it would look a lot different, right? It would definitely involve more interaction with the deaf community. It would involve things like a light doorbell, right? So that you know when somebody's ringing your, you know, just all of these different things that would be more supportive and allow him to flourish. But because they're looking at it from the perspective of a hearing person, they just, you know, that's the dominant culture.
Well, and that's, so I still draw on your lesson about universal design.
Yes.
Right? And that's where that comes in. Being able to think outside the box of what your normal is and understanding what other people's normal is and trying to mesh those experiences together so that we all can win, right? I mean, that's the basics of universal design, right? Which is very important in life in general and in society that's made up of all different types of cultures, all different types of abilities, which also helps us to foster the potential that we all inherently have, so that we can increase that potential, which increases ideas, increases advances, and increases, quality of life for an entire society, as opposed to just some people in society.
Absolutely. And it also, along the same vein, demonstrates why it's important to have voices at the table of underrepresented communities. Because if they had sat down and asked Junius Wilson what he wanted, where do you want to, he said he wanted to go home, but apparently nobody really sat with him and was like, what does that mean?
No, they were just like, we'll make you a home.
Yeah, they were like, that sounds hard.
Yeah, we got a cottage over here. That's your home.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll assign you a home.
But you can't get drunk.
And you can't smoke tobacco.
And no Snickers for you.
No Snickers. And you ain't even getting your own key for a whole year.
Exactly.
Know that you know how to use it properly.
Yeah. And so, and it also, to me reminds me of how we infantilize people with disabilities. And we also have a history of infantilizing people of color. And so Junius, even well into the 90s, was not considered to be an adult in the way that we consider other 90-year-olds an adult.
Even the people who were being thoughtful about what he's gone through still continue to infantilize him as a 90-year-old man. Like, when I see a 90-year-old man and they do something, I give them all the grace possible, because they're 90.
Yeah.
Like they've seen things that I can't even imagine, and they've lived that long to where they have a right to kind of be who they are.
Yeah.
Even if that person's not that good of a person,
right.
I give people grace and understanding that they were affected by society just like I'm being affected today.
Absolutely.
And for reasons why I choose to try to affect society in a different way. But yeah, I think this is a good lesson in understanding why inclusivity is necessary.
Yeah.
Right. It's a perfect lesson.
Yeah.